The other two parts are the World Monetary Fund, who were the targets of the protests in D.C. This one's harder to explain. I will do my best. Both these organizations were created after World War II, originally to rebuild Europe because corporations wanted an infrastructure put back in place, and they sure as hell weren't going to pay for it. After all, why should they? They're corporations. All they did was manufacture the bombs that blew up the old infrastructure. So the government should pay to make the new one. And the International Monetary Fund was created for short-term loans to bail out countries, big and small, if they suddenly ran into a huge deficit and couldn't pay their bills and might rock the boat on Wall Street if they defaulted on their debts or whatever. Well, now it is mutated into World Bank does a lot of the big loans and initiates the big projects. Education, health, oh, forget it. Construction companies can't make any money that way, no. Whatever Bechtel wants, Bechtel gets. Dams, giant highways. New one they're going to want to do is, I think it's a 600-mile pipeline through the equatorial jungle of Africa to benefit oil companies who want to pump out some oil. That's what the World Bank has in mind, but they do it in the form of loans with high interest rates, and so a lot of these countries can never afford to pay the whole thing back. And the IMF does short-term bailouts, but again, high interest rates, plus they attach these conditions. We're not going to bail you out unless you go on our austerity program, where we send in some Ivy League economists, Lily White, of course, who say, well, you're going to have to lower salaries, cut jobs, get rid of health benefits, get rid of welfare for the most part, cut education, and quit growing your own food and grow export crops for the corporations that fund us instead. And that's what's been going on all over the third world, where places like Mozambique now owe the World Bank and IMF 8 times as much money as they take in every year. And Africa, on the average, spends 4 times as much of the money they can raise paying off the interest to the World Bank and the IMF than they do on addressing starvation, education, infrastructure, welfare, you name it. And in Africa, there's a badass AIDS epidemic going on right now. In South Africa, over 1 in 10 people have AIDS now. But the IMF and World Bank just want their interest payments back instead, which some people who have been fighting these organizations full time liken not just to economic colonization of the old colonies, but outright genocide. When you let 30,000 kids a day die from malnutrition, but you want to collect interest money or you're willing to pay for pipelines and dams. That's why people are so mad at the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. The Jubilee 2000 program are the ones who are just saying, why don't they just forgive the debts and wipe the interest and go from scratch, or these countries are never going to recover. However, the IMF and the World Bank won't hear of it. But there is a way to make the World Bank in particular listen that's only beginning to be talked about, but get ready for this one, is what floats the World Bank is bonds. And who buys those bonds and invests in those bonds? Universities, city governments, the same people who used to invest in South African bonds and South African companies until the heat from boycotts all over this country and on campuses all over the world put so much heat on they had to pull out, and then the apartheid government finally collapsed. This is what needs to be done to the World Bank. Researching whether this city and others holds any World Bank bonds, and time to pressure them to get rid of them, perhaps. Meanwhile, to get us to like all this stuff, as corporations intrude more and more into our lives, to get us to accept it, they just sort of try to get us to like it by co-opting. Taco Bell now has extreme meals. I just saw a Nissan SUV commercial where they described their gas-guzzling swine mobile as radical. Remember the Subaru commercial that talked about Subaru being punk rock? Co-opt, 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 where the consciousness of the 60s gets sold back as that 70s show. They're trying to do it again on a much bigger scale. Getting people to wear the logos. You know, little kids have all these huge logos on their clothes now. Has anybody ever seen Tiger Woods' hair? One person in this room ever seen Tiger Woods' hair? I doubt it. You'd have no idea whether there's wires growing out of it attached to American Express and Pepsi and everything else, do you? No. He always has a hat on with a mark of the beast on his forehead. The Nike swoostica, it's on Tiger's head. Soon it will be on yours. And you're one of the few cities left that doesn't have all your sports facilities named after corporations. In San Francisco, they just opened a new baseball stadium named after not Willie Mays, not some civic hero. It's named after the phone company. And even in Green Bay, they're getting ready to auction off the name of Lambeau Field in a couple years, too, to the highest corporate bidder. Maybe they can rent it every few years. Who knows? But that's not what should be going on. And, of course, a main way they like to co-opt us is to take our favorite songs and spit them back at us in TV commercials, which, unfortunately, globalization hell came to my house in the past couple years. To make a long story short, former members of my old band, Dead Kennedys, sued me, claiming that I burned them on royalties, which I did not do. Yes, we goofed on accounting, found the error, and paid them. But no, they wanted revenge, in my opinion. Revenge for my refusing to let Holiday in Cambodia be put in a Levi's commercial. The lawyer they have also has represented Bill Graham, Journey, Doobie Brothers, Boston, Santana. Basically, a showbiz lawsuit to punish me for not being corporate enough. They even brought it to trial. They would not settle. So there was a trial this spring where they marched up like little parrots. Ray, Klaus, and D.H. Peligro all claimed they wrote all my songs. And then the lawyer said, oh, he couldn't possibly have come up with any of that music because he doesn't play an instrument, and what's more, jury, he doesn't read sheet music. And they claimed there was this mass conspiracy of me to hide money from them. Never mind, they could never come up with a motive or anything, and there wasn't any money hiding in the first place. They even called as an expert witness a CPA who works for Grateful Dead Records, who openly coveted the Dead Kennedys catalog for Grateful Dead in his deposition. How sick is that? The Grateful Dead Kennedys? He claimed that I owed them damages for lack of promotion because, among other things, Alternative Tentacles Records, the independent label I've had all these years to try and operate outside the entertainment industry and stick to the ethics that everybody in the band believed in at one time, I suppose. Anyway, owe them damages because we didn't run ads in Billboard or Rolling Stone, and worse yet, there were no videos on VH1. The jury fell for it and awarded them damages for lack of promotion because this guy said, well, if X amount more money had been spent on advertising, X amount of more CDs automatically would have been sold. In other words, damages on CDs that don't exist. And damages for other things. So at this point, no money, but I've got to appeal the damn thing. So now their lawyer has made a motion before the judge saying that they want her to rule that they can just kick me out of the former band member partnership, throw a little money at me, then not only run off with the songs to pimp any way they want to, but never have to pay me again. So much for the ethics that Dead Kennedys stood for. Words cannot describe how much this sickens me. But I mean, somebody had to say no to putting their favorite songs in goddamn commercials.